welcome back to the All-American Book Club, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Eden Gordon-Hill. We have a very special guest joining us here for the second time, the president and CEO of National Religious Broadcasters, and we are focusing this month on stories of hope and redemption as we head into the Easter season. Hey, you know what? I preach every Saturday morning to you guys about getting out of the pews, getting off your tuchus, and actually taking action. And so we're going to be talking about calls to action, what National Religious Broadcasters has been doing and continues to do as they take the hill, talking about AM radio, talking about fighting for Christians in the public square. So please help me welcome to the show, Troy A. Miller, the president and CEO of National Religious Broadcasters.
Great to be with you today, Eden.
Thank you for being here. So a lot of things I want to talk about in the short 20 minutes that we have here at the All-American Book Club, but I really wanted to kind of zero in on first your relationship and your faith and really where you came from and how, and just the powerful journey of your faith and how you are leading NRB and how that's impacting people.
Well, my story is kind of, I guess it's a little interesting, and maybe good for all of you out there who have people in your family who are not saved yet, then you've been praying for them and working on them. I was that way. I grew up in a pretty messed up home, divorced parents, and actually ended up spending more time with my grandparents, my mother's parents. They had a little farm in Nebraska. Really kind of, Eden, honestly, a pretty unsupervised kid who got into a lot of trouble. The only thing that kept me probably out of jail was the fact that most of my uncles were law enforcement and would take me home instead of lock me up. But on my dad's side, my grandmother, my grandma Keaton, she got saved in the late 70s and immediately turned to her family as her mission field. And she was, kind of a story of redemption herself. She grew up in a very rough life. She would have been what you would have thought of back in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. She was, a barmaid and just kind of a tough lady and stuff. But she got saved, and God got a hold of her. She just had a heart for the gospel, and she, every time I would visit her, we would talk about the Bible and stuff, and then I'd go back to being crazy and stuff. But I joined the Navy, and when I was in the Navy, I was in the Persian Gulf in 1987 when the U.S. decided to do tanker escorts, and my grandmother sent me my first Bible, and she sent me a book by D. James Kennedy called Why I Believe. First time I ever read an apologetic about the Bible, like why is the Bible true? Why can we see it as dependable? What do these stories really mean? And it changed my life. God got a hold of me, took this crazy kid from Nebraska who was a crazy sailor also at the time, and really changed my life. And I'll tell you, the neat thing behind that was my grandmother got that from being a constant watcher of Christian television. That's all she ever had on. She ordered that book through the D. James Kennedy Ministry when they give these books away for a gift of any amount. She would order those. She would order his little pocket sermons and send them to me. And that, as I said, that whole idea that it was Christian television, Christian communications, that my grandma used as a tool to bring me and also my sister and several of my cousins, all of us to Christ, because people took that ministry and other ministries. She sent me materials from a lot of other ministries as well. They took the time to speak into the culture and to speak into the greater media distribution outlets.
And look where it's brought you now today. And you sit there and just say, wow, the impact that your grandmother made all those years ago, and looking to 81 years of the National Religious Broadcasters fighting for Christians to speak and in the public square, to be on TV, to be on the channels, etc. And I mean, that has made such an impact. Talk to that.
Yeah, I mean, it really has had an impact on my life. I came out of that, and then I ended up working for 11 years in the tech industry for a big computer company, Fortune 200 computer company. Had a number of really, great opportunities, great things I did there. But I always wondered what God was doing with my life. What was important about this? I thought I wanted to be a pastor. Those doors never opened up, but it was God opening up the door first to Christian television through Dr. Kennedy's ministry, then to Christian television through NRB TV, and then NRB. And I think it really impacts me because I understand firsthand the change in people's life, the impact in people's life that Christian television, Christian radio, Christian communications, Christian media can make to people. And I guess that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about NRB's, mission to keep those airwaves open, to keep those avenues open for Christian communicators. Because not only in my personal life and seeing the life and other family members of mine, but working for Dr. Kennedy, we would constantly get the letters in, of people from just all aspects of life, people who tuned the show in at 1 a.m. And, they were contemplating the next morning to go in and have an abortion. And now they didn't do that. And they send us a letter 9 months later with this beautiful baby little girl. I'll never forget that letter as long as I live. Or the gentleman who wrote us about, he thought life was done for him. He thought there was no way God could reconcile all the terrible things that he did, and he was going to end his life through a drug overdose. And yet he watched the program and learned that God has died, that Christ died for every sin. There's no sin too big for God to forgive us from. And he decided, instead of taking the drug overdose, to give his life for Christ, and went into prison ministry after that. And that's the power that's behind us in the public sector. That's the power of Christian broadcasting, Christian communications. We change lives of people for the better. And today we consume more media than ever. So media is the place all Christians should be.
Well, I'll tell you what, having experienced NRB in the past couple years, and you can tell this year nearly 6,000 people attended the International Convention in Dallas, Texas. That speaks for itself. And we still are hearing and seeing all of those who are promoting the convention, the impact it made on them personally and professionally, but also how we band together as brothers and sisters saying, we are taking Capitol Hill, we are fighting policy, we are fighting everything that's happening in the public square, the censorship, the weaponization of government. And you have said in many interviews, we have that leader now in the White House who is advocating for us. But I have said we can't grow complacent because we have 4 short years to get stuff done. So let's talk about the stuff. Let's talk about the nitty gritty of things that we need to be advocating for. And how do we go about doing that?
Oh yeah, and there's look, I'll just build on that a little bit. We're so happy that the current administration is who it is and who's leading it. He spoke at NRB a year ago in 2024. He talked about how important the Christian message, the Christian foundation is to our society, and it is the real pillar of our society. And he promised to address weaponization. He promised to address the attacks on pro-lifers. He promised to address a big issue for us, AM radio. He promised to address all those, and he is. But we have to keep that up because there's still an assault, by the bureaucracy that's left in the government, by mainstream media, legacy media, and by the corporate. AM radio is a perfect example. So Ford Motor Company decided they were going to take all the AM radios out of the cars in the future. They really couldn't give a reason why they were going to do that. It was, it's interference, this, that, but it really turned out to be a $35 part on a $20,000 car is nothing. And what it comes down to is really who controls the information in the car. There's a lot of money to be made if they can have their connected dash be under their control, and you have to subscribe to get information today rather than just get it free over the airwaves. So we're fighting hard to keep AM radio. And it's interesting, Eden, why just AM radio? Why did Ford not go after radio, period? If you have the connected car, you can stream all your radio. Why not go after radio, period? So we don't think it was just AM radio. AM radio happens to be the number one genre for conservative talk. It happens to be the number two on there is Christian talk and teach, and number three is Spanish. And all three of those have been a target of the progressives. All three of those they would love to silence because, look, there are 40 or 50 million people that still listen to AM radio across this country. And we've seen the conservative shift in the Spanish community. So there's a bill right now in the Senate that's working its way through. There's a bill in the House that's working its way through. The Senate bill is pretty, it's on a great track. We're going to be up in DC soon, and we're going to try to get that bill pushed through. But if you're out there, call your congressman or send an email to your congressman and tell them that you want them to vote for the AM in every dash bill, that you want the AM radio to be preserved and saved. Just send that note to them and say, hey, save AM radio, don't get rid of it. You rely on it for the emergency alert system. You rely on it for the teach and talk that goes on there. Just let them know that. That would really help us get that bill moving forward. And it would also send a message to Congress. We don't want everything to be subscription based. We want our option to be free over-the-air content that we decide what we want to listen to, not some car manufacturer.
We'll also talk about the whole hurricane emergency services piece. You mentioned that briefly, but AM radio is used across the nation as we head into hurricane season. Talk just a little bit about that, having grown up in the Midwest. You know exactly how.
Oh, right. We grew up in Tornado Alley. And also I spent a number of years in Florida. I think I've been altogether through 6 hurricanes. So you really rely on the National Weather Service that comes through AM radio to tell you, what's going on, to tell you when to shelter, when it's safe to get out, to tell you where to find emergency services. One of the first thing that goes down in these natural disasters, and the same thing with the fires in California, the cell service went down. The minute electricity went out, the cell services were down across the country, across the area, or they were scattered. So you really couldn't get your information. The best place to get it was AM radio. The AM frequency, just the way, without getting too much of the physics of it, the AM frequency just has a much better ability to penetrate through all of these storms and through the weather, and it's not affected by the weather as much as even FM is, but certainly not as much as television or the cellular service. So it's so important to people. AM radio saves so many lives during these natural disasters, and then post the disaster, this is the most reliable way to find out where you're going to get the help or get help to you quickly.
Also, I wanted to talk about faith in the public square. So those on Capitol Hill who are tuning in, the legislation, the policy, all of those you have just encompassed in this interview. But I also want to talk about all of us who are on these Christian stations, or this is not a Christian station, but I talk, let's preach it. Let's preach it until, push that button. So let's talk about that. How can we be more active in the public square when it comes to the faith and not be afraid to do that?
Well, look, I said this in a little cliche at NRB, but I really believe it. I mean, we're in a golden age of communication. No other time in human history today have we been able to reach people just instantly around the globe. We have these cell phones that we carry with us, almost everywhere. We have our laptops, we have our tablets, we have our computers, we have connected TVs. Today, pretty much almost everybody is on one or another different platform of social media. And so we're all today really communicators in the public square. We've been really brought together. And I told a few really kind of cool stories about some people there. There was a group of gentlemen who I read about, and they would get on and play one of these, multi-person games, and they have people from 3 or 4 different continents on there playing these games. And one of them was a Christian, and he invited people to just a Bible study before they started their game. And now that Bible study, my understanding, has grown to several hundred people. Here was just he's not a pastor, he wasn't a teacher, he was just a guy who wasn't afraid to share his faith in the public square. And that's what I'm challenging all of us to do these days. We're all on some sort of social media. Does anybody on social media even know you're a Christian? Have you shared your faith? Have you shared your testimony? Have you really reached out to somebody? None of us really knows who we talk to, what the real story is going on within their heart, what God's working on them, what troubles they're going through, what questions they have. So it's really up to us to all be communicators today. And look, we know that some of these social media platforms are still, very hostile to us and very hostile to that Christian message. And that's where we come in at NRB. We're out there really, fighting that on every level we can to make sure you have the freedoms to do what our forefathers said you could do: the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and the freedom and the free exercise thereof. Church was never meant to be in your four walls. It was meant to be lived out in our lives daily.
One thing I want to zero back in on was the convention and the faith-driven media panel that you guys organized. And you are tapping into that in a couple different sound bites you just mentioned, but you included Adele Malpass and Raymond Aurora and Bill Abbott from Great American and Cheryl Chumley from the Washington Times. And they all had the panel to really focus on the faith-driven media. Talk to me a little bit about, the vision as we are going forward in this golden era, this new era of communication in the next 4 years. You see these leaders out there, and there's a censorship attempting to happen to a lot of them in the public square. So you, as the leader of this international organization, what kind of vision are you setting for 2025 and for the next year as we head into what tools can we take away from NRB to combat?
Yeah, and that was a great panel. That these were, like as you said, these are industry leaders that were none of them were working in particularly overtly Christian, organizations. But there are so many. One of the things we found over the last several years, there have been so many Christians that are out there in the mainstream media, and especially in new media today, in the rise of podcasting and the rise of Substack and bloggers and other folks out there. There's so many people out there. And in this environment, people like the panel you described, they're not afraid. They're not hiding in the shadows. They're out there letting people know, who they are. And who they are in Christ and what their faith is. And look, I really have a hope and a vision that we will see more Christians getting into media and getting into mainstream media as well as new media out there. And we're really encouraging people, if this is a call that you feel, go get into media. Christians ought to be the best journalists that are out there because we live by a morality of truth. We live by a conscience that says we want the truth to be the thing that we speak out of our mouths. We don't want the world to be a world of lies or a world of propaganda or a world of messaging. So Christians actually, in my opinion, make the best journalists. They make the best reporters. They make the best commentators that are out there because they have a real desire to help people. And here's another thing, Eden, that Christians also in these areas, and that panel was a real example of it. They know that people are smart. Yes. And they know that people can think for themselves, and they need you to give them the information. They don't need you to tell them how to think. They need you to tell them what's going on and what the implications are and those things. So it's a real time. It's a great time. I think we're going to see more and more Christians getting into media and starting to take over a lot of these platforms. Some of the top bloggers, some of the top podcasters, some of the top people people that are writing on Substack and some of these other tools today. Some of the top videos on YouTube and TikTok even are by Christians that are out there getting involved. And so look, we're going to push very hard to get new people involved into this area. That's a big vision of mine.
What does NRB need more than ever right now? I know you have a lot of big projects that you are tackling. Is it, we could talk a little bit about the capital campaign with the few minutes we have left, especially as it encompasses the Washington DMV area. Are there other things that my audience could come alongside of NRB to participate, to support, to activate, all of those kinds of things?
Well, look, for you that are out there in the audience that are Christians, be praying for NRB. NRB is, as Eden said, this is not an ego statement, but we really are the one organization that's on the front of battling for Christian communicators. We have a lot of great members that are out there with us as well within our organization, but be covering us in prayer. The second is get informed yourself. Go to nrb.org and you can see all the issues that we're tracking, the things that are coming up. You keep up to date on what we're doing. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter, NRB Today, and our Washington Next Week newsletter, so that you know what's going on and you know the areas you can be involved in. And then third, don't be afraid to be active. Don't be afraid to call your congressman, to call your senators, to let them know these areas are areas of concern for you. And then, as you said, Eden, we're on a capital campaign. We're trying to buy a permanent building in Washington, D.C. for us. We've been leasing there for a number of years, but we really want a permanent building. We don't know when the leasing companies are going to turn hostile to Christians. We have this great time right now, but we know that there's a lot of hostility in corporate America still toward the Christian message. So there's some information on nrb.org about that capital campaign if you want to participate in that or know people that would like to participate in that. So just follow us there. But really keep up on what we're doing. Sign up for our newsletters, and then you'll see the call to actions we have, and you'll know the issues that we're working on right now at the present.
Well said. Well, Troy Miller, thank you so much for being here at the All American Book Club. Thank you for kicking off the Easter season with us and for just inspiring us with your faith story. And for such a time as this, this is the time for Christian communicators in the public square. So thank you so much for being here. For all of those who are tuning in, stay tuned for our next segment. We'll be right back.